welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Annette, and today I'll be taking you through how I made my paintings go from this to something more like this. And when I made the first painting, I had just started making digital art on my iPad. I have the iPad 12-inch. So it's the big one, and I have a newer iPad with the second generation pencil. And for me, I've really loved using it. But I've also used a Wacom tablet, and I still do use Wacom and Photoshop. So I draw both on my computer with my my older gear, and I also draw with Procreate on my iPad, so I do both. But the drawings that I'll be showing you today are both drawn on my iPad.
Now, you see, the first drawing suffers from a lot of different challenges. Firstly, I am all over the place with this drawing. I go directly in with the colors, and I have absolutely nothing planned out or mapped out. I go in with not even the color-picked colors, and I start creating the shape of the face before I've even made a sketch. And this makes it very overwhelming to work. I recommend, if you are a new artist, to begin in the traditional way, with a sketch, then a line art, then flat color, shadow, and finally rendering. This just makes the whole process more easy to understand. It streamlines the process for you. The last thing you want to be when starting out on a color study that is supposed to improve your art is confused. When I started this piece 10 years ago, I was so eager, I wanted to learn so badly, and I thought I could just do everything at once. And as you can see, not having any structure, not following any sort of protocol will make you land on your face. And it's a valuable lesson. It's a hurtful one, but it's valuable. You can still see how my style is shining through even in this old drawing. The way I do the hair and the details in the hair has remained a little bit of the same, but mostly the style and like the anatomy, the sketching, the color picking, everything is wrong. And you can also see that the way I'm placing my shadows, there is no clear light source in this image. She's supposed to be holding a lantern and walking through a dark corridor, but there's no way to tell that that's what she's doing. She could be standing in a library, she could be standing maybe somewhere at like noon, or maybe in twilight, and it really just messed up my whole process. Instead of lingering too long on what went wrong, I'd like to focus on all of the things that I did right in my most recent drawing. Now, for my newest speed drawing, I've made some significant changes. Remember, we are 10 years of experience in the future, and I've learned a lot throughout my journey. I begin, of course, with a sketch and then a line art, and the line art is more or less finished, like how I would like it to be as my piece is completed. And I start by blocking in all of the main colors, and when I say main colors, I mean the colors that there are the most of in the reference photo. And I try my best to color pick the closest to the actual colors that are in the photo, and then I block in certain areas that I believe are correct based on what I'm seeing. And I try to remember that the texture is important to preserve. Hair has texture, skin has texture, the clothes that she's wearing have folds and light and shadow that changes everything all the time. So I try to not make her and her hair and her clothing too smooth. I find it really difficult not to do that, but you know, part of the art journey is challenging yourself. So try to have some texture in your paintings. And once I've blocked in all of the colors that I would like to use and I would start rendering, I would also make multiple layers that are above my line art layer, which means that they are the top layers. And I start going in making details, like little ruffles in the skin or shadows in her earring, hair strands that are like out of place. When you look closely at a photo of a person and you're trying to capture that through a color study, you have to also capture all of the small details that belong to that image. And that would be stray hairs or a wrinkle here and there, or how the light shines through some places in the hair and makes it lighter, or in the hands and makes the hands warmer or lighter, and how the skin breaks out in different colors. Like, you use green and blue and yellow, orange, red, use almost every single color in skin. Personally, I find it to be one of the most difficult yet rewarding things to make, because skin is quite elastic and it's very textured, and it's been a great challenge for me for the past 10 years to learn how to do it properly through doing these color studies. And I would very much advise you to do a whole bunch of color studies. And in the first video, you can clearly see that I have no direction. And because I'm not doing everything in an orderly manner, I keep tumbling over myself as I'm going through the painting. I keep making the same mistakes, and I'm using a very loose sketch instead of a precise line art as my base, and then going straight in with the colors. And what that is doing is that it's making it very confusing for me, because when I started out, and probably when you are gonna start out too, you get really nervous because you have to do all of these things. I personally get really overwhelmed like very easily. So I feel like I have to do the line art, I have to do the shading, I have to do the color grading, I have to do the color picking, I have to do the details, I have to render, I have to do everything. And you really lose yourself in the process because you can't really tell where you should stop, where you should start. You don't have any structure. And so the biggest difference that I can see between these two videos that are 10 years apart is that in the painting that I made a week ago, I begin with a sketch, I create my line art, I look at the I have the reference right next to me at all times, and I use that to pick out the different colors, and then I lay down like a map of where I want all the different colors of my drawing to be. And then I start rendering, I start bringing in the detail, I start doing all the line work, all of this, like the small stuff, and the details as well. And another thing that makes that really easy is to not merge your layers. I know that that's like a big, that's a crime to commit, to like merge all of your layers into one layer and work on just that. I used to do that too, don't we all? But in the original drawing that you saw, that was 10 years ago, I had one line art layer and one color layer and nothing else. And that, if you're an experienced artist, you can do that. But I couldn't. Not when I started out. It took years and years of practice for me to actually finally do something about it and to get it right. And I start like mapping out my colors and getting a feel for the depth. Creating skin, actually painting skin, is really difficult. If you followed me on my Instagram, you know that I mainly paint animals because I actually find fur and other stuff to be easier to draw than skin and flesh and veins, and everything that's like underneath the skin can be very difficult. And it took me quite a while to learn how to make humans well,
like in a way that it actually looks like a human. Not to say that like realism is the only way to paint, because that is not true at all. And I wouldn't necessarily say that my style is that realistic anyway. But for a color study, and the color study that I did in both of these drawings, they were meant to be sort of realistic, because I'm using the reference photo as an actual photo of a person in both drawings, and I wanted to replicate that as best as I could, which means going for more of a realistic style than my actual regular style. And having your own unique style is a wonderful thing, and I want you to have that, so don't forget. But please, when you do color studies, when you do technique studies, when you do all of these things, it's just so that you can have some tools to dig from. Because if you start out your journey with just breaking every single rule and just doing whatever, that could work out for you, but it can also make things very difficult. And so learning the boring stuff, like for example in this video color studies, and going for realism, trying out realism, can be very beneficial for your art. I would like to talk about the importance of practice. And practice is the backbone of artistic growth. You have to practice to develop and refine your artistic skills. Personally, there's a saying that there is no such thing as talent. There's only practice. So the people who are really good at drawing are good at drawing because they've been drawing for thousands of hours, not because they were born with this magical talent. And so practice is allowing you to refine your skills as an artist and evolve eventually, which is really the fun part. Because practice builds muscle memory, and you kind of practice builds muscle memory, and it fosters an understanding of the artistic process that you wouldn't get if you just got into it with no practice whatsoever beforehand. And drawing, much like any other discipline, requires practice. You can't be good at it like right away. And I feel like maybe that's why a lot of people quit, because you see these amazing artists all over the internet and you want to be like them. Like, you want to do just as good as these artists. But then when you start drawing, you see that you're not on their level, and it really discourages you. But that's where the key is, and it's discipline, it's practice, it's to keep going, because if you don't stop, you never fail. I've heard that before, and I thought it was a wonderful saying. And then after you practiced, I think that's when you start to evolve your own unique, cool, crazy style, and really like improve upon your art skills. So remember, please, to take the time to do these things, to practice line art, practice color studies, anatomy, all the stuff, perspective, the boring stuff. To some people it would be considered the boring stuff, but it really is going to help you down the road. And never let anyone tell you that using a reference is wrong, because I've heard some people saying that, oh, if you use a reference, it's not really your art. That's a lie. Because even like the great masters, like the old painters and everything, they all drew from real life, from sketches, from studies, from croquis, and you're not supposed to use your imagination, your brain for everything. Because if you've ever tried to draw like a hand or a foot, like you're starting out, you're trying to draw a hand or your foot, and you're trying to draw it from just your memory, it's not going to be correct. You have to use a reference. And so allowing yourself to use that reference is very important. And the same goes for a color study. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot to me if you wanted to subscribe or like the video, share it with your friends, or let me know what you thought was great or helpful. It really means a lot to me and it helps support the channel. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye!